Now we are going to start our webinar. So let me introduce myself. My name is Miho Yoshikawa. I'm working for Child Protection Team UNICEF Ghana, based in Accra. And then I'm the focal point for Child Online Protection. And then today I'm going to moderate the session together with my colleague Esther. Esther, would you like to kindly introduce yourself?
Good morning, bonjour. I'm Esther Ruiz. I work in the Regional Office for West and Central Africa, and it's an honor to be here today with you. Please remember you have interpretation, English, French, French, English. Chers collègues, vous rappelez qu'on a l'interprétation anglais, français, français, anglais. Merci.
Thank you very much, Esther. Now I'd like to introduce Catherine Mira, and she is working as a Child Protection Regional Advisor Officer in charge at the UNICEF West and Central Africa Regional Office. And to kindly start the webinar, over to you, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Miho, and I hope you can hear me well. If you just thumbs up. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to welcome participants and panelists. So, dear distinguished guests and esteemed colleagues and partners, on behalf of the UNICEF West and Central Africa Regional Office, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the first webinar in our regional series on protecting children from online and technology-facilitated violence. Today's session, Introducing and Implementing Policies and Legislation in the Digital Age, is organized in partnership with Safe Online, an international organization supporting UNICEF in many countries to create a digital world that is safe and empowering for all children and young people everywhere. Since 2023, UNICEF Ghana, and in collaboration with the government and other key stakeholders, has been implementing the project Protecting Children from Online Sexual Exploitation in Ghana, scale-up of interventions with the greatest potential for impact and evidence generation. And this project has already made a lot of progress, and we will have the opportunity to learn about these advances during today's discussions and throughout the next two webinars. So while online and technology-facilitated violence is a pressing concern, it has not yet gained full visibility in all countries of West and Central Africa. In many contexts, other areas of child protection have been prioritized, with fewer investments and less engagement devoted to online child protection, and including the prevention of and response to online child sexual exploitation and abuse. Recognizing this gap, Ghana, the Regional Office for West and Central Africa, and Safe Online have come together and agreed to include a regional component into the Ghana specific project. And this regional component aims to document best practices and lessons learned, and to facilitate knowledge exchange, networking, and mutual learning with other countries in the region, and no matter what level of progress they have made. Our main objective is really to draw on the lessons from initiatives in countries such as Ghana, but also others like Nigeria, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, to promote this regional dialogue and to strengthen collective action. And by doing so, we hope to accelerate efforts to prevent and respond to online and technology-facilitated violence across the whole region of West and Central Africa. To this end, we plan to establish an online community of practice on child online protection for all stakeholders across the region. And the proceedings of this community of practice will be documented, capturing both best practices and lessons learned from various countries, and thereby creating a regional knowledge base. In parallel, raising the profile of child online protection within the West and Central Africa region will also be critical to ensure increased prioritization by governments and to unlock new opportunities for resource mobilization, allocation, and action. I would also like to recall that nearly all the countries in the region have made specific pledges and commitments to end violence against children in all settings and including online at the global meeting held in Bogota last year. UNICEF is committed to following up and supporting the countries to translate these pledges into concrete action. Let us therefore keep the momentum alive and move forward towards with purpose and determination, and demonstrate to the world that Africa can lead the way in protecting children and also in the digital space. We are very grateful to SAFE Online for its support in making this webinar series possible and for strengthening our joint efforts to end online violence against children in West and Central Africa. I really look forward to the valuable insights from our distinguished speakers today and to your active engagement in this session as well as the two upcoming webinars. I hope you enjoy this session and thank you very much. Back over to you, Miho.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Next, I'd like to introduce Serena Tomasino. She is the Senior Technical and Advocacy Lead from SAFE Online. Serena has over 15 years of experience in violence prevention, technology, and evidence generation, ensuring children thrive in safe, nurturing, and digital environments. She excels in navigating complex initiatives and partnerships with experience across policy, advocacy, and programs within the UN, EU, and CSOs in various regions. Known for her collaborative approach, she consistently delivers top quality results even in complex stakeholder networks. She holds advanced degrees in sociology, program management, and a research fellowship in culture and technology. And over to you, Serena, for you to kindly say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mio, also for the great introduction. It was very nice. It's very nice of you, and it's very nice of being here today. And I see also some familiar faces on the panel. We were very excited about this webinar, and it's a great pleasure for me to be here today representing SAFE Online. As Catherine mentioned, we are the only global fund dedicated to tackling technology-facilitated child sexual abuse and exploitation in the context of other digital harms impacting children and other forms of violence affecting children. Since 2017, we have invested 100 million across 100 countries in the world around evidence generation, technological innovation, and systemic change. We will put the link to our annual report in the chat so you can learn more about our strategies and our results, but also we will put our contact details in the chat in case you would like to reach out to learn more. These investments, the knowledge and connection they generate are paving the way to scale what works, to ensure that the digital experience of children across the world are safe, inclusive, and empowering. This is also why we were very supportive of the idea of these regional workshops, as exchanging best practices across countries is very important, simply because this area of work is still new and also fast moving. And therefore, professionals find themselves often unprepared. I found myself unprepared as well. I had to learn about technologies. I had to learn about, speak with engineers, speak with the technology companies across the years now, which I didn't used to do before. So, this is also why exchange is so important. We are all learning together how to make safe spaces digitally for children across the world. The other aspect that is new and complex is that it requires greater level of collaboration across sectors. As I said, technology companies, ICT ministers, engineers, but also it requires high level of collaboration across borders. Digital harms, they don't respect national borders. And this is also why, we are supporting regional exchanges across the globe. We hosted a number of workshops last year in different regions, including in West and Central Africa in May 2024, in collaboration with critical partners, including UNICEF and EGPAT. We will also put the link in the chat to the report that came out of this regional workshop, as includes specific takeaways for Western and Central Africa, including key findings from other regions. We have invested 15 million in a large-scale project called Disrupting Harms that is being conducted in 25 countries in partnership with EGPAT, Interpol, and UNICEF. And we can also put in the chat a regional brief that look at cross-cutting comparisons for Eastern Africa and Southern Africa. As the phenomena obviously is manifesting differently in different contexts, but the lessons we are learning are particularly relevant also for Western and Central Africa. As I think Catherine mentioned, we are keen to support the region to show leadership in this area of work, to show how the investments are being made, the connections are being fostered, can make a difference for African children. Regional collaborations remain critical. National efforts are important, but unless we go into tackling this issue as with partnerships and collaboration across borders, we're not going to be successful. Today's webinar is about policies and legislations, which is a strategic component to obviously prevent and respond to this type of abuse. Afrouz will tell you more about the global landscape, but generally, we can tell you from our perspective that there is more attention to the issue. Many actors at national and global level are making progress, including the AU. The African Union is progressing towards a new model of law. The EU has been working on this as well, and also other countries like Australia or UK, they are pushing the agenda to establish new legal frameworks to make sure that children are safe online. This is incredibly important also for Western and Central Africa. We know that as connectivity evolves, more children are going to be connected and more opportunities are going to be brought to their lives. But also what we know for sure is that, digital platforms and digital technologies are not designed with children in mind, they're designed for children, for adults. And I think this is one of the biggest shortfalls and where we are trying to address also with companies, to ensure that digital safety by design is incorporated in the ways of working, and to ensure that, also regulations, policies, and legislations, they are future-proof and they are foreseeing the harms before it happens, because the numbers of risks and threats that children are now facing online are increasing, and that's an incredible concern. We keep on hearing about alarming rise of harms, and to the point that now the World Health Organization has defined this as a global health crisis for children. The type of harms are fast-moving, increasingly complex, and are impacting millions of children. We can put in the chat the information about the scale and complexity, so you can learn more about the latest data. But just so generative AI, immersive platforms, and social media, while they offer immense opportunities for young generations, without the right safeguards, without the safety by design and the right policy and legislation, they are exposing them to profound harms that have direct impact to their mental health. They will hinder their development. They will disrupt their education and learning. All the investments in education are not going to be productive for them if they are suffering from abuse, and therefore they're going to have long-term socioeconomic consequences also for the community, the society, and country as a whole. We are not starting from scratch, but there is a lot more work to be done, and we already know what works. We know we need evidence to inform strategies. We need robust legislations. We need survivors and child-centered design, and most importantly, we need financing. I think Catherine also mentioned it that one of the strategic objectives is to generate more resources to this agenda. The changes in the global donor landscape this year is very concerning, and is diverting the attention of donors and investments to this area. This is also why Safe Online is now coordinating with partners a new coalition around financing for children's digital safety. This will be a strategic platform to bring philanthropy, private sector, financial institutions, donors around the table to talk about how to address the big funding gap to ensure that children are safe online. Again, I think my colleague is putting all the links in the chat, which is great. Thank you so much, Angela. Please be in touch with us if you would like to learn more about all our work, if you would like to learn more about this new initiative. But also, just the last thing I was going to mention, your decisions today, your investments today are going to shape the lives of children in the future. So don't underestimate the importance of what is happening today at policy and legislative levels, but also across other levels. As more connectivity is expanding in the region, children will have opportunities, but also greater risks. So please, stay committed and be in touch. And thank you so much, Mira, and the rest of the team for organizing this webinar. It's a great opportunity, and we stand to continue supporting it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Serena, for insights. So Next, so from now on, we are going to welcome 4 key speakers who are going to provide an overview of the global landscape, regional initiatives, and also 2 countries examples from Nigeria and Ghana. So first of all, let me introduce Ms. Afruz Kaviani Johnson. She is a child protection specialist working for UNICEF headquarters and based in New York. And she leads efforts to tackle technology-facilitated violence against children. She manages global partnerships and policy advocacy and supports UNICEF country offices and regional offices around the world. Afruz has over 15 years of experience leading teams and initiatives aimed at promoting children's rights, combating child abuse and exploitation. She was previously posted in Malawi and before that in Thailand, where she worked across Southeast Asia and Pacific. Earlier in her career, Afruz worked as a senior investigator and conciliator for the Australian Human Rights Commission and as a lawyer. She holds a PhD, Juris Doctor, and Master of Social Science. And over to you, Afruz, for you to kindly provide an overview of the global landscape. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miho, and thank you, colleagues. It's really a pleasure to participate in this webinar, the first in what is bound to be a very stimulating exchange and learning across the region. Let me acknowledge Ghana's pioneering work, and it's fantastic to, of course, have had that strong investment and support from Safe Online, and to really bring together different countries in the region and beyond to really exchange, share that learning and good practice. So as is the theme of today's webinar, I'm really going to be looking at one of the most disturbing violations of children's rights that are facilitated by technology, and that is online child sexual abuse and exploitation. Of course, we all know, but let me just say it, of course, there are wonderful opportunities that come about through digital technologies, opportunities for growth, learning and empowerment, but the focus now today and in my presentation is looking at technology facilitated online sexual abuse and exploitation. So I'm going to cover 3 main points in about 12 minutes or so. So just giving you a taster, how legal frameworks fit into what needs to be a comprehensive response and why they matter. Secondly, the international and regional legal foundations that should inform national frameworks. And then thirdly, just a snapshot, just signposting those very key legal standards and powers that are needed at a national level in order to address emerging challenges. So UNICEF and many stakeholders are working to combat child sexual abuse and exploitation, use a comprehensive framework aligned with the We Protect Model National Response. So you can scan the QR code on this slide to learn more about the Model National Response if you're not already familiar. But essentially this framework sets out 6 key areas, 6 key domains in which we must take action, in which we must build national capability if we want to adequately prevent and respond to child sexual abuse and exploitation. Obviously, many countries in Western and Central Africa and across the continent have really seen such a rapid growth in digital technology, but this has not necessarily been matched by these various capabilities coming up to speed. So we don't have adequate laws, the services and the education to keep children safe. So establishing strong laws as part of this comprehensive framework, and it's not just a nice thing to do, it is a legal obligation under international and regional child rights instruments. So on this slide, you'll see a quote from the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, where they explain that states have an obligation to establish and implement laws that protect children from violence, not only in real life or, you know, in the physical world, but also in the digital environment. So when we talk about law reform, when we talk about policy reform, we're not talking about, you know, an optional thing. We're talking about fulfilling a binding obligation to protect children from harm, including harm facilitated by technology. And I'm sure everyone really appreciates this, that laws, you know, do many, many things. They give children a legal basis to claim their rights. They also empower duty bearers. So they empower law enforcement, social services, regulators with a clear authority to act. So they do need this written out in the law. And then they hold all actors, be they businesses, you know, and public sector actors accountable by setting minimum standards for prevention, response, and redress. So without laws, we know that perpetrators exploit loopholes. They may act with impunity. Law enforcement and social services may lack the authority to intervene, and companies may evade responsibility. So absolutely critical if we are to address and protect children from harms online. So our legal frameworks, our international, our regional legal frameworks are many, but I'm just putting a few up on the slide. So obviously the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and its optional protocol on the sale of children, the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and then some Council of Europe conventions, which, although the title is Europe, they are open for countries beyond Europe to ratify as well. So the Budapest Convention and the Lanzarote Convention. Alongside these primary instruments, there are also really important interpretive instruments. So the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, their general comment number 25, very insightful in how to apply the Convention on the Rights of the Child in relation to the digital environment. And then also from the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, who we're privileged to also hear from today, they have general comment number 7, which also holds important guidance for states with respect to technology facilitated child sexual abuse and exploitation. We're seeing very recent international developments as well. A new international cybercrime convention was agreed last year, and it's open for signature this year with 3 specific offences which are very relevant for children and protecting them: child sexual abuse, material online grooming, and non-consensual sharing of intimate images. There are also many developments within the European Union and on the African continent. So what is the national landscape? Hard to summarize shortly, but of course we know, and we'll hear from today, how a growing number of countries have strengthened their laws on online child sexual abuse, but gaps still persist. And I think what I just want to emphasize now is that it's not only looking at those online or technology facilitated laws that relate to children, but also child sexual abuse and exploitation overall, making sure that those are in line with international standards. So we have to look at this challenge of tech facilitated abuse within the broader challenge of child sexual abuse and exploitation. So let me just quickly signpost a few of those key legislative priorities at a national level. So criminalising these offences such as child sexual abuse materials, including the live streaming of abuse, sexual extortion, grooming, including through digital technologies. Removing the statutes of limitations on child sexual abuse. So as many of you will understand, this is a term that relates to the time period for the commission of an offence after which a suspect cannot be prosecuted. So many countries' national laws enforce a limit, but we know through children's lived experience that they often will not disclose abuse until much later in life. So it's super important that these statutes of limitations are removed. And also, along with these substantive provisions, making sure that procedural laws are updated for the digital age. So some of those areas are signposted on this slide. There are new risks, new challenges, including AI-generated child sexual abuse materials, which present a major gap in some jurisdictions. Laws must criminalize this content. We know that it's harmful, even in cases where a real child is not used. We know that it promotes the sexualization of children, it fuels demand, and it can cause harm to children if their likeness has been used. So absolutely critical that this is included within national laws. And then self-generated content. So this is content that may be taken by children of themselves. The international guidance is very clear on this issue. Children should be treated as victims and not held criminally liable for producing images of themselves. And moreover, children should not be held criminally liable for the generation, possession, or voluntary and consensual sharing of sexual content of themselves where it's solely for their private use. So really important there that laws don't inadvertently criminalize our children where they should be treated as victims. And then really making sure that the laws are future-proof to the extent possible. Business responsibilities, of course, this is a whole other important category that national laws or regulations must address. We call for a rights-based approach within the broader framework of the guiding principles on business and human rights. So this means requiring businesses to take systemic measures, not just responding after the fact, but carrying out child rights due diligence, including impact assessments, so they understand how their services may create risks, and then taking mitigating measures. And then, of course, requirements around transparency and accountability. And then alongside these components, looking at victim and survivor protections. So in the laws, ensuring that there are child-friendly justice processes, ensuring that those professionals who are dealing with these issues receive adequate in pre and in-service training, ensuring that victim services are coordinated, ensuring that there are redress mechanisms and compensation. So the laws on the books are not enough. They depend on implementation guidelines, on education, and of course, sustainable funding and capacity for implementation. So in wrapping up, let me highlight these 4 key areas: updating criminal laws to address tech-facilitated abuse, holding companies accountable through regulatory obligations, ensuring child-centered justice and support, and then equipping families and professionals with knowledge and resources. And all of these must be informed by evidence, children's views, the views of civil society, including the lived experience of survivors. Much of what I've covered is actually included in our global guide on legislating for the digital age. You can scan the QR code here to access the document, and we are intending to create an update of this, which will be coming out next year. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Afruz, for a very insightful presentation. And now that we learned about global landscape, let's move on to the regional initiatives. Let me introduce Ms. Opal Mashosha Sibanda, who is a legal practitioner, currently serving as a legal researcher at the Secretariat of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights of Welfare of the Child. In this role, she also serves as a focal person for the Working Group on Children's Rights and Business. Ms. Opal has extensive experience in juvenile justice and in advancing children's rights in the digital environment, including online safety and protection, among other issues. She holds an LLB degree from the University of Zimbabwe and LLM in Human Rights and Democratization in Africa from the Center for Human Rights, University of Pretoria. And over to you, Ms. Opal.
Thank you very much, Miho. A very good morning to everyone. Please confirm if you can see my screen.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to participate in this very important webinar, and just to highlight that this topic is actually of great interest for me. And, I actually did my master's thesis on the protection of children's rights to privacy online, as well as protecting children from online sexual exploitation and abuse. So it's actually a pleasure for me to take part in this very important initiative. So as Miho has already highlighted, I'm going to briefly talk about some of the regional initiatives when it comes to child online safety. So my brief presentation, in terms of the outline, I'm going to begin by giving an introduction, which is going to be followed by an overview of the regional frameworks on online child safety. And I'm going to specifically focus on some of the initiatives that have been undertaken by the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child in the issue of child online safety. And then I'm going to conclude with lessons learned and recommendations. So by way of introduction, it has already been highlighted by the previous speakers that the digital environment in Africa is actually rapidly expanding, and it has brought about both opportunities and risks for children. So we know that in this regard, internet access, mobile penetration, and digital platforms are actually growing across the continent, and they are enabling children to learn, to connect, and to express themselves in new ways. So we note again that in addition, or as we note that the internet is actually bringing about opportunities for the realization of children's rights, it is also increasing their exposure to online and technology facilitated violence. And this includes online child sexual exploitation and abuse, grooming, cyberbullying, exposure to harmful content, and privacy violations. So we note that in this regard, there are various factors that are actually exacerbating online risks and harms, and these include limited legal and policy frameworks, weak coordination between sectors, and insufficient child-friendly reporting and response mechanisms. So this evolving digital landscape actually calls for comprehensive legal frameworks, multi-stakeholder collaboration, and targeted investment to ensure that children are safe, empowered, and protected in the online environment. And this takes me to my next slide, where I'm going to briefly go through some of the regional legal frameworks on child online safety. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to delve deeper into the provisions of each. So I'm just going to briefly talk about these legal frameworks and some of the salient features. So as a starting point, Afroz has already indicated that we have the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. So here it is important to note that even if the African Children's Charter does not specifically mention children's rights online, it is important to note that the rights that are enshrined in the African Children's Charter also apply in the context of the online environment. So when we look at the African Children's Charter, we note, for instance, Articles 10 on the protection of children's rights to privacy, Article 16, protection against abuse and torture, as well as Article 27 on protection of children from sexual exploitation. And we note that these provisions also apply in the online environment. And just to highlight that, just as the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the African Children's Charter also recognizes 4 rights as guiding principles, and these rights should actually apply in the context of the digital environment. So another noteworthy development at the African Union level is the AU Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, also known as the Malabo Convention, which was adopted in 2014. So we note that this is actually a noteworthy development in the AU, as the goal of the Malabo Convention is to address the need for harmonized legislation on cybersecurity in African Union member states. And to establish in each member state. So notably, the AU Convention on Cybersecurity actually places an obligation on member states to protect children from violations online, particularly Article 29, Sub-Article 3, which requires member states to criminalize various offenses related to child pornography. So we'll note again that there's the recent AU Child Online Safety and Empowerment Policy, which was adopted in 2024, which guides AU member states on online child protection, and it actually emphasizes on the children's rights principles, coordinated action, child-centered digital design, and continuous review of legislation to address emerging risks in the online environment. So besides that, we also note that some of the human rights organs or the human rights bodies at the African Union level have also been taking initiatives to protect children's rights online. For instance, we note the African Commission on Human and People's Rights adopted what we call Declaration of Principles on freedom of expression and access to information in Africa. And it is noteworthy to mention that these principles actually contain specific provisions that promote online child safety and privacy, and they place an obligation on member states to ensure legal safeguards against harmful online content and the misuse of children's personal data. It has already been mentioned before that there is an ongoing AU model law on child online safety, which aims to support AU member states in developing and enacting laws that are broadly harmonized across member states in providing robust protection for children online. So moving to the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, just to highlight for the interest of some who do not know what is this African Children's Committee. So it's actually an AU organ that is actually mandated to implement the provisions of the African Children's Charter, and it actually monitors the implementation of the Children's Charter across the African Union member states. So to begin with, we note Africa's Agenda for Children 2040, which was adopted in 2016. So this Agenda for Children 2040 is actually an elaboration of the AU's Agenda 2063. So it contains 10 aspirations, and notably we have Aspiration 7, which provides that every child is protected against violence, exploitation, neglect, and abuse. And Agenda 2040 notes that by 2040, no child is exposed to sexual exploitation and used for child pornography. So Agenda 2040 is also important as it calls upon member states to prohibit child pornography and to ensure the effective implementation of the laws prohibiting child pornography among AU member states. So again, the African Children's Committee has adopted a general comment on state party obligations in 2018. So this general comment actually addresses broader state responsibilities to protect children's rights, and this extends to the online environment. And notably, it actually provides that specific legislation is required to respond to the allegations of sexual offenses against children, including sexual exploitation, which takes place in the online environment. So another initiative by the African Children's Committee is the general comment on Article 27 on sexual exploitation, which has also been mentioned. And I would say that this is a very important general comment because it's actually based on an AU Executive Council decision, which placed I don't know if I should call it an obligation, or which actually mandated the African Children's Committee to make sure that in its work, protection of children's rights online is actually included. So when we look at this general comment, we note that it elaborates the legislative, administrative, and other measures that should be taken by AU member states to protect children from all forms of sexual exploitation and abuse, both offline and in the online environment. So among other issues, the general comment actually provides that legal and policy frameworks should be reviewed and, where necessary, adapted to rapidly changing realities concomitant with developments in the digital world. It also encourages member states to make sure that legislation addresses online grooming and provides a mandatory reporting obligation for internet service providers. And there is also an obligation for member states to criminalize all offenses related to child pornography. So we all agree that when we look at child rights violations in the online environment, they are quite complicated because, you know, sometimes people actually perpetrate those violations in different countries. So it's important to note that in this general comment, there is a section on extraterritoriality and international mutual legal assistance and cooperation, whereby the general comment provides that there should be legislation that gives courts jurisdiction to prosecute all offenses committed within the state's territory, regardless of the nationality of the victim or the perpetrator. So recently, the committee also adopted a general comment, number 9, on the right to education. And, you know, drawing from the lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic, where education shifted to the online environment, the general comment actually encourages member states to adopt policies and laws to safeguard children's interaction online when accessing education online. And it provides that policies and laws on virtual learning should require educational institutions to conduct regular technical assessments of digital tools and to ensure that contracts with service providers include strong and child-friendly data protection measures. Amongst the initiatives of the committee, again, is the guidelines on ending violence against children that were adopted in 2024. And these guidelines actually emphasize that child online protection legal frameworks should be developed to mitigate against online risks and harms facing children while enabling them to navigate the digital environment safely and confidently. Notably, the guidelines also provide for strategies to address violence against children on digital and online platforms. And these include, for instance, undertaking research, ratifying the Malabo Convention, adopting legal and policy frameworks to counter online violence against children, and strengthening the capacities of law enforcement and judicial systems. The committee also adopted a resolution in 2022 on the promotion and protection of children's rights in the digital sphere, and this was adopted through the committee's Working Group on Children's Rights and Business. So this resolution, among other things, calls on member states to ratify the Malabo Convention and to also enact cybersecurity and data protection legislation and to place legal obligations on digital service providers to report child abuse online. It also calls on the private sector to invest in innovative tools and solutions that respond to the evolving online risk for children and to undertake safety by design due diligence practices to put user safety, especially children's safety, at the forefront of the design, development, and the release of online products and services. So I might actually take the whole day talking about, yes, can you give me 5 minutes to finish? Yes.
Sure.
So
kindly
yes.
note that you have a couple of, like 2 minutes to go, if it's okay. Thank you for your understanding.
Yes, it's okay. Thank you very much. So these are actually some of the initiatives that have actually been undertaken by the committee in ensuring that children are protected online. We have the state party reporting procedures. We have the special mechanisms whereby there is a special rapporteur on violence against children, the Working Group on Children's Rights and Business, and the committee has actually undertaken Day of General Discussions and the Day of the African Child on children's rights in the digital environment. And by way of conclusion, I would say the lessons learned and recommendations. First is the lack of harmonization between international standards and national laws, which hampers effective protection, and thereby member states should undertake comprehensive legal reviews to align domestic legislation with international and regional human rights instruments. And then there is also insufficient regulation and oversight of online businesses, and member states are encouraged to enact and enforce legislation that holds online service providers accountable for preventing and addressing online harms. And lastly, legislative reforms often lack the necessary infrastructure and resources for effective implementation. So to ensure impact, legislation should be supported by detailed implementation strategies, including budget allocations, capacity building for relevant institutions, interagency coordination mechanisms, and ongoing monitoring and evaluation systems. So this is the end of my presentations, and I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you very much. Over to you, Miho.
Thank you very much, Ms. Opar, for a very informative presentation. And just as a reminder to all participants, kindly note that there is a Q&A feature in the Zoom call, and then please start posting your questions, and we will take all the questions later on during the Q&A session later on. So now, after having heard from African Children's Committee on the regional initiatives, we are moving to countries examples from Nigeria and Ghana. To key speakers from Nigeria and Ghana, kindly note that you have 10 minutes each, and then this way we can ensure that we have a sufficient time for Q&A and discussion later on. Thank you so much for your understanding. So let me introduce Ms. Juliet Ohafuru Obiora, and Program Director Administration of the NGO. Executive Director at the Action Against Child Sexual Abuse Initiative, ACSAI. Juliet is a child protection and online safety expert with nearly 2 decades of experience in the humanitarian sector. And then the organization Action Against Child Sexual Abuse Initiative, ACSAI, hosts the In Hope supported hotline in Nigeria and works as a trusted partner on content takedowns for platforms. Juliet is a recognized regional voice in both national and global coalitions, advancing child rights, digital resilience, and survivor-centered approaches. And over to you, Juliet, for your presentation. And let me share your presentation as we discussed earlier.
Thank you, Miho. And it's really also great to see some familiar faces on the panel. As introduced, I'm Juliet Ohafuru Obiora, Executive Director, Action Against Child Sexual Abuse Initiative, AXA. And as an In Hope hotline member, AXA leads national conversations on online child protection. Also, our youth-driven programs promote safe digital hygiene for Nigerians' most vulnerable population, in most cases, children and young people. And I'm really honored to be speaking on introducing and implementing policies on legislation for the digital age, the Nigerian experience. Next slide, please. Great. So why legislation matters to us? We've heard from UNICEF, of course, why legislation matters. But for us, Nigerian population spans over 200 million. And of course, we have such a very large fraction of the internet users. And one of the largest online communities in Africa is Nigeria. And also looking at the cybercrime cost to our economy, and most importantly, the risk that children are exposed to in these spaces. Great. So looking at our legal and policy frameworks, Nigeria has quite a number of laws and policies that are shaping its digital landscape, spanning from, of course, the Child Rights Act of 2003 that has a component on child pornography. We have the Cybercrime Act of 2015 that criminalizes hacking, phishing, CSAM, and of course, online fraud. We also have the penal and criminal codes. It was recently updated and then it also addresses issues around defamation and other ICT-related offenses. We have the NAPTIP Act that targets human trafficking, including online facilitated exploitation. We also do have, most importantly, on the pipeline, as my people will say, the Child Online Protection Policy, which has just passed its first reading. It's still stuck in the first reading, but this is a place that we're going to be having more conversation about as I go on, because this is a law that focuses mainly on safe use practices, age-appropriate controls, awareness among parents, educators, and also service providers. So this is a very key policy for the online protection space. Also, the UN Convention Against Cybercrime that was adopted last year will be signed into law in Nigeria, hopefully this October. And this is a conversation that UNODC has been leading strongly, and we're really hopeful to see this come to pass. Nigeria also has kind of identified and brought together most of these key enforcement and regulatory agencies that should be in this space. That means that we're already having these conversations. We do have NAPTIP in this space, which is the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons. We have the Nigerian Police Force, the Cybercrime Center, which is really a big national cybercrime center that has facilities to deal with issues around cybercrimes. We have the Economic and Financial Crime Commission, the EFCC. We also have the National Communications Commission, the Nigerian Data Protection Commission, we have the National Identity Management Commission, we have the Federal Ministry of Justice, and of course, civil societies, tech platforms, and other youth-led initiatives, such as the ones we're running. And these bodies we're having a lot of conversations and recognizing each other's roles and the roles we're playing in this space. Now, some of the emerging models for us that is one of what I would call some of the practices that I would refer as best practices for us, or conversations that are leading us to some solutions, is the multi-agency task force, which is the JTCTC task force. I mentioned a couple of law enforcement and of course the Ministry of Justice alongside. So they have been able to form this task force, and they're coordinating responses to online exploitation across board. We also have the National Referral Pathway conversation that is kind of in the pipeline, because we're having this conversation with the National Communications Commission. They are leading this conversation, not we're having this conversation, to have a referral pathway where victims and survivors of child online exploitation can find the support they're looking for across all forms of support, be it psychosocial support. So this is a conversation that we're still having, and we're hoping that this will come to life in no time. We also have a lot of the public-private partnership, where NCC and the telecoms are having a lot of conversations on SIM registrations, compliance, and of course safety campaigns. And the civil society organizations such as ours, amongst others, are also playing their roles, such as our youth-led initiatives that are championing the young people, the digital natives who are in these spaces, to continue to spread the message around digital safety, and most importantly, as a hotline to report and ensure, because the first point of call when you see child sexual abuse materials, of course, is to ensure that it is taken out of that space to protect the dignity of that child. So Nigeria is also collaborating with a lot of international partners across the globe. We are seeing a lot of issues around more cybercrime prosecutions, because we're having these conversations, especially with the task force that I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of conversations, and we're seeing more prosecutions, be it defamation, be it online child sexual exploitation and abuse. There's a lot of prosecutions that are going on because of these conversations that we're having. We're also seeing stronger cooperations with global partners. Like I said, we've had a lot of support with partners such as NICMEC has supported NAPTIP, an agency in Nigeria, for a very long time. We also have IJM, the International Justice Mission, all the way from Australia, supporting building capacities of law enforcement, building capacities of the judiciary system, and and so on. The UNODC, the We Protect Alliance, we've also partnered with them in some campaigns that are driving young people's voices. And of course, InHope has also provided some sort of support. Apart from the technical support we have as an InHope member, we're also looking for opportunities to have our law enforcement trained and specialized in addressing SESAM issues. So for us, some of the major challenges that we have seen so far would be, the Child Online Access Protection Bill, which is a very important bill when it comes to the child online protection in Nigeria. And this is because it is the only bill that focuses even more on our issues on child online protection, that captures the components of parents, caregivers, that captures the components of educators, and more importantly, the awareness and the education of children to be abreast of what they are going to be facing on the online space. We also have a lot of enforcement gaps, slow judicial processes, and limited technical capacities, the low public awareness, which enables people unknowingly, out of ignorance, to keep committing these crimes, the jurisdiction issues across, trying to tame these crimes, especially, I would say, within Africa as a SESAM, as an InHope online, having those connections across to spread and be able to take down when you need to. And also the multi-sector technical working group. I think this is really important, to have a dedicated body for child online protection, not just NAPTIP that has to handle other online crimes or the EFCC, but dedicated, strongly just focused on child online protection so that children can get the priority that they deserve. So some of the opportunities that we are looking at and saying, okay, these are the opportunities we have for strengthening opportunities, of course, like I mentioned before, capacity building, more public awareness, and of course, not just building the capacities of our law enforcement, but also the tech innovation, providing them with the technology to address this issue. The issues that we face technology also require technology to solve them. So we need to also to develop better tools for reporting and also for tracking on all these issues on the online space. And most importantly, the multi-stakeholder partnership that cuts not just across agencies, but also engages both civil society and, more importantly, the young people to be in these spaces and to have the conversation on how to address the issues that affect them the most. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the lessons we have learned so far, of course, will be that technology is evolving. And today we're having conversations around AI-generated CSAM, and we are barely even building our policies to accommodate, child sexual exploitation and abuse on its own, not even the AI. And then we have the AI on its new as a problem. How are we working to ensure that we're evolving alongside technology, and it's evolving at a speed that is far, geometrically as compared to how much work we are putting into our policies? Also, the collaboration between the government and private sector and communities is also really essential. I think that, it is very important to start building this relationship, because there's a kind of a missing link if the communities are not on board to be able to report or to be able to understand what online child exploitation it really is and how we can more or less address it. Also, the youth engagement is really, really critical. Like I said earlier, young people, they know these trends, they know the problem. So we must also begin to recognize this as nationally, have them in as major stakeholders and major voices who are addressing this issue, who are joining hands to support in addressing these issues. Also, data protection and privacy also underpins trust in the digital age, and this is also one of the lessons we are learning on the go. So our next step will be to continue to next slide, please. Next slide, please. So our next step will be continue to advocate for the passage of the Child Protection Bill, Online Protection Bill. This is very essential to us. We also need to strengthen our regional and international cooperation to be able to build our capacities to, follow best practices across the globe. And regularly, we have to also review and update our legislation, which is really important, as regularly, especially given how much technology is evolving. So we have to try to review as regularly as possible. Also, we need to invest in training, technology, and most importantly, awareness programs. We also need to embed child protection and human rights in all the digital spaces, in all our digital policies. And finally, we need to also look at establishing a multi-stakeholder technical working group on online child protection that is not the multi-agencies, but also multi-stakeholders that have the young people's voices constantly being in the room when they're having these conversations. Thank you so much, and I think that will be all. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. So I'll also be looking out for questions. I know I am right on time. I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Juliet. You're very much on time. I appreciate your understanding. And then also thank you very much for your very insightful presentation. So next, Ghana is going to share the country's experience with all of you now. Let me introduce Dr. Jamal Tonzua. He is the Deputy Director General of the Cybersecurity Authority of Ghana. Among other things, he oversees cybersecurity compliance and policy development, promotion and protection of digital rights of children, cybersecurity capacity building and awareness creation, and cyber diplomacy. He previously served as a government legal advisor, a military staff officer of the Ghana Armed Forces, and consultant at United Nations. In those capacities, he has provided a decade of professional services to the government of Ghana, foreign governments, intergovernmental organizations, and policy think tanks. Dr. Tonzua holds a Master of Public Policy degree from the University of Oxford, Master of Laws degree from Georgetown Law and Directorate in International Affairs from Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies with a specialization in international cyber operations. And then over to you, Dr. Jamal, for your presentation,
very
please.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and greetings to all the speakers and participants. I would want to start by thanking UNICEF and Save Online for all the support and investments that you've made in terms of child online protection in Ghana. It was a privilege to be with you, Miho, and other stakeholders sometime last week when we had the Child Online Protection Stakeholder Coordination meeting. And it's a great pleasure to have this opportunity, which highlights what Ghana is doing in this space. And it encourages us to do more in terms of the work for which we have gathered here. Having said that, I would move straight to discuss the threat landscape or the kind of landscape that we have in Ghana. And we have reports from the National Center on Missing Children, which states that sexual images and videos of children have been assessed and uploaded in Ghana, and the statistics are quite astronomical. In 2019, we had 19,733, and this rose over the years, and we now stand at 23,626 as of 2024. And in terms of the system that we run in Ghana, the key policies and legislation on child online protection, especially online child sexual exploitation and abuse. We have legislation in terms of the Cybersecurity Act of 2020, which has a particular focus under Section 4J of the legislation to promote the protection of children online. And specifically, Section 62 to 66 are devoted to this. Now, in addition to that, we've developed a national child online protection framework, and we also have some reporting mechanisms. And so the Cybersecurity Authority where I work has developed an incident reporting point of contact to have reports of children who are abused. And we also have ongoing sensitization workshops for children nationally, and this goes to awareness creation. We also have very particular emphasis on the regular conduct of research to identify the trends and the risks for mitigating online child sexual exploitation and abuse. As part of that system as well, stakeholder collaboration is very key, and we collaborate with stakeholders and actors to combat online child sexual exploitation and abuse. And this is also supported by cooperation, where we still collaborate with international organizations such as UNICEF, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, as well as Interpol and other organizations to address online child sexual exploitation and abuse. Then we have, as part of the mix, a focus on capacity building for the private and public sectors on matters of child online sexual abuse. We also create resources on social media and advisories for child online sexual abuse for public awareness. The Cybersecurity Authority that has been established under the Cybersecurity Act. So it's a significant step that we have taken towards safeguarding our children in the digital age, and it provides a robust legal framework that addresses the various aspects of online safety for minors, from age-appropriate content to reporting mechanisms, including data privacy and cyberbullying prevention. And so the challenges, even though they still exist, the legislation demonstrates our commitment to creating a safer online environment for our most vulnerable users. And we foster collaboration between stakeholders, and we stay proactive in addressing emerging threats so that we can work together to ensure the protection of our children online. Diving deeper into the legislation, just as Afroz mentioned a while ago, in terms of the framework for online child online protection, We have criminalized certain conducts. Section 62 of our legislation criminalizes indecent image or photography of children. We also deal with matters that have to do with, dealing with kids for purposes of sexual abuse, like online grooming. We also have criminalized aiding and abetting of any of these activities, and we have proscribed and criminalized cyberstalking of children, sexual extortion of children, and non-consensual sharing of images and the threat to distribute such images. In terms of stakeholders, I mentioned a while ago that last week we had a child online protection stakeholder coordination meeting, and what we do in this regard is to implement our national policies and legal frameworks effectively and to bring together platforms of stakeholders who would include the government, private sector, civil society, the media, industry, and communities. And this coordination helps us to set priorities and encourage inclusive decision-making in all child online protection matters. We also employ tools like coordinating committees and feedback loops, which we use to ensure accountability and flexibility, and we build capacity of stakeholders, and this includes training, resource sharing, and technical support. We help stakeholders to perform their roles effectively, and together we take these steps to connect policy design with real-world execution. For lessons learned, we have 3 key lessons. The first is that our policies succeed when all our stakeholders, including government, private sector, non-governmental organizations, and communities, are engaged from the very beginning. And we also have learned that without structured coordination, which would include regular meetings, efforts become siloed and accountability dissolves. And finally, training and resources must meet local needs. And that's why we include our communities, and we include youths as well. And we also have a specific focus on society and culture as part of the framework that Afroz mentioned. We are pleased to also announce that we will not rest on our oars in terms of this effort. We appreciate the fact that you are highlighting our success story and we've shared our lessons, but beyond that, we see it as work in progress. As my colleague from Nigeria mentioned, we are reviewing our laws to ensure synergy in terms of the responses to protecting children online. And I'm pleased to also mention that next week, under the guidance and support of UNICEF, we would be holding a technical workshop to develop child online protection guidelines for industry in Ghana. And so this is what we have to share. And I would end by also, taking time to thank UNICEF once again and Safe Online for all the support that you've been giving us. And we look forward to a more sustained and strengthened collaboration together with our other international partners. Thank you very much for your audience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jamal, for a very insightful presentation. And colleagues, now we have approximately 8 minutes for the Q&A and also the discussions. And I can see one point raised by Mona. Thank you very much, Mona, in the Q&A chat. Kindly look at the terminology. Now that child pornography is no longer used, and correct terminology is the child sexual abuse materials, and we call it CSAM, and to be in line with the global standards. And kindly see the details like in her comment in the chat box. And then I can also see one more question. Thank you for this question. Let me read it out loud. Thank you for the presentations. Do you have any advice on mobilizing partners, whether mobilizing funding, engaging telecom digital service providers in private sector to implement protection programs, or engaging government partners on policy improvement? I think this is very critical point, which has been actually covered by all of the key speakers today, and especially Dr. Jamal from Ghana kindly mentioned the development of the child online protection guidelines for businesses, and then to support them to prevent and tackle online and tech facilitated violence in compliance with legal frameworks. is there any key speaker who can kindly like add your insights? Maybe Afruz or Miss Opal, do you have any insights from your side? Or of course, like Dr. Jamal and also Juliet, if you have any additional information to share.
Thanks, Miho. I can jump in if Opal doesn't want to say anything
you.
immediately. Yeah, it's a great question. I appreciate that it's asking not only about mobilizing funding, which can be difficult, but also just engaging different stakeholders. And I think with respect to engaging, whether it is government partners or whether it is private sector, we have to always look for mutual interests, right? And I think for government, you know, there is, and depending on which part of government you are looking at, which agency, I mean, the relevance of protection in digital spaces, we can make the case. It's no longer an optional thing. It's very relevant, whether we're talking about education, whether we're talking obviously around cyber or digital development, social services. It's not something that we can look at as something that's going to go away. It's very present in all aspects of our lives. So I think with respect to engaging governments, there is a large appetite, and I think just making it align with their respective mandate and interests is the way forward. With respect to the private sector, I mean, depending on what private sector actor it is, because obviously each of them play a different role in the digital ecosystem. So again, looking at where is their sphere of influence, and happy to perhaps put some resources in the chat to help support that that analysis, because one can't go to, you know, a mobile operator expecting them to do something that actually isn't within their power, if that makes sense. So I think doing some background work and then engaging in a way that makes sense. And then with respect to mobilizing funding, I mean, I'm not sure if Serena from Safe Online wants to jump in on that, on the current landscape, and really, you know, looking at maybe adjacent sectors or donors that can be approached, and really making children's protection relevant for their agenda as well. Yeah, I see Serena turned on her camera, so perhaps she has some words to share there.
I was listening. Thanks, Afruz. That's very insightful. All that you just said and fully aligned with our approach and strategy. You know, the current funding global ecosystem is being changed and evolving pretty fast. So, you know, the challenges remain. But I think, as in line with what Afruz is saying, what we are doing, we are exploring how to better interlink this area of work with wider efforts. For example, digital transformation, digital education, health, because, you know, these are all areas that have much higher budget and possibly more interest from donors and investors. So that's one thing that Afruz already mentioned, you know, position the risks around the use of technology and the harms within wider agendas that might, you know, secure more interest from investors. The other thing we have been looking at, which we hope we will be able to share more information possibly early next year or even sooner, we're trying to explore innovative financing models, you know, to try to think a little bit more out of the box. And we are engaging with some experts around how you know, these could be applied to this sector. You know, we know that some work has been done in the environment sector, you know, like looking at how innovative ways of financing can be used for this area of work. We are at a very early stage, unfortunately, but this is something we are doing for the ecosystem, not just for ourselves. So if you know, follow our newsletter, or if you stay in touch with us, we should be able to share more information with you also by the UNICEF Ghana offices if it's helpful. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you so much, Afruz and Serena. It's very interesting and exciting point. And so, Ms. Opal, you can kindly come in, like to kindly share insights with us in response to the question when it comes to multi-sectoral collaboration. Thank you. Over.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to add on to what has already been said, I think sometimes the approach also is not for us to attack these stakeholders that we work with, but then it should come, from a point of wanting to collaborate with them. So I would say, from my experience as well, for instance, for the private sector, telecom and digital service providers, I would say engagement is often strengthened where programs are actually framed around user trust, safety, and their corporate responsibility to actually protect children online. And then when it comes to governments, I would also repeat again that it is always better to position online child protection within broader digital policy frameworks, cybersecurity agendas, as well as national development strategies. So maybe finally, I would say it's equally important is building trust and fostering multi-stakeholder collaboration, ensuring that all these players, be it civil society organizations, the private sector, and government actors, actually see their roles as complementary in this regard. So that is what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Opar. Is there anything to add from you, Juliet? If not, I can see one question.
Yeah.
Sorry, please come in. Yeah.
Okay, great. So what I would like to just add is to bring to just talk about what these crimes would mean to us. I mean, this is a transnational crime, meaning it exceeds borders. So it's really interesting, or it's really important to build these capacities regionally. One of the greatest conversations that I've always we've had recently around the just adopted UN crimes against cyber, the UN laws against cybercrime. Sorry, I'm not being particular on it. Was seeing how we're looking at digital evidences, how they're going to be preserved, and so I believe that this is a big conversation. And this is a conversation that we should be having regionally. And that's why I'm really happy listening to Opal, especially looking at policies or the laws such as the AU model law that is going to be all-encompassing for the African region or the West African region, as the case may be. But it's really important that we start to build strategies that also connect regionally to be able to address this issue. And of course, Miho, you wanted to ask a question?
No, sorry. Yeah. Thank you so much, Juliet, for the insights. And then I was going to ask Dr. Jamal because there was one question to Ghana. I'm just looking at the Q&A and chat box. This question is in reference to Ghana. Ghana currently has no safeguarding framework for children and vulnerable groups. So how do we ensure that cybersecurity protections are effective and sustainable without the broader safeguarding system in place? As far as I know, Ghana has actually very positive, progressive legal environment for protection of children overall, including online violence, protection from online violence. But in this regard, Dr. Jamal, I know you are the lawyer. Would you like to kindly briefly respond to this question?
Yes, thank you. And even beyond just having it, like you rightly said, we have the Children's Act, which is supplemented by the Cybersecurity Act. I'm sure, I don't know if the person has read this legislation, but beyond that and the framework that we have developed, in terms of even implementation, as you would know, together with the cybercrime department of the Ghana Police Service and the Economic and Organized Crime Office, and even with Interpol, we're doing a lot of work in this area in terms of moving beyond just having the framework and implementing it. And so I'm happy to engage with the person offline and understand the basis for those claims. And
Sure, Dr. Jamal, thank you so much. Today's webinar is all about learning and knowledge exchange. So we can continue our discussion bilaterally and also offline as well. And then having said that, let me introduce Mr. Fiacre Makasi, Deputy Representative from UNICEF Ghana, to kindly close the webinar. Fiacre, over to you.
So first of all, I would like to thank all of the speakers today for sharing their valuable perspectives, knowledge, and experience. It really was a pleasure to be on this call and to hear such a rich variety of experience around the same theme. And I'd also like to thank all of the participants for a very interactive discussion, even though we are in fact short on time. Seeing that there was over 70 participants at one point, I can take part that this is a very, very interesting and urgent topic. I also want to express sincere appreciation to Safe Online for their generous support and partnership to make this webinar possible, this webinar series happen. And altogether, and both panelists and participants, by your engagement today, I believe we have succeeded in having a very rich and insightful discussion. And I just want to try and recognize the speakers individually for what they brought. Catherine began, of course, pointing out that there needs to be an increased prioritization internationally around the protection of children online. She referred to pledges which were made in Bogota and our collective role to help governments make those pledges reality. Serena, you talked about the importance of investment for scale, designing systems which are future-proof, and really the importance of trying to keep pace with the advancement of technology. You also pointed out, as several others do, around the need to ensure sustainable financing for work in this field to make sure that there's adequate and robust systems in place. Opal, you gave a very comprehensive landscape review around the legislative environment across Africa, which I thought was extremely useful. And Farouz, of course, I mean, you pointed out where legislation needs to improve in general. You talked about the new risks which are impacting our general and emerging focus in this space. You also talked about the importance of the business sector as well as a key player in finding solutions and in making sure that they stand. Juliet, you also gave a very good landscape review around what's happening in Nigeria in this area, but also in terms of the challenges and opportunities. And Dr. Jamal, I mean, you talked about the lessons learned from Ghana, particularly around how it's possible to see a multi-stakeholder approach, one which is benefiting from structured coordination. So there were several more points made. I think I just wanted to bring those up because in terms of these closing remarks, I wanted to try and reiterate a little bit more broadly a couple of key takeaways. The first is that we need to ensure that national laws comprehensively address, recognize, and emerging risks of violence and exploitation in the digital environment, and that they are quickly and continuously adapted to the advance of technology. Secondly, it's also critical that we accelerate our combined efforts to support the full implementation of national policies and action plans and enforcement of legislation that stand to make a real and positive difference for the protection of children from online and technology-facilitated violence. Both of these need to be supported by robust and sustainably resourced national governance mechanisms that can effectively coordinate stakeholders and oversee and drive what many of you mentioned about multi-sectoral action, as well as facilitating and enhancing cross-border coordination. So colleagues, I'm confident that today's exchange and the collaborative spirit that we are maintaining here will motivate us to continue to advance our shared goal of creating a safer environment for children online. And with this in mind, let me take the opportunity to remind you that the next webinar will take place on the 17th of September. And that webinar will focus on the critical role of civil society in preventing and tackling online and technology-facilitated violence. For now, let's look forward to our continued engagement and partnership as we work together to strengthen efforts towards ending violence against children in West and Central Africa and beyond. Thank you very much. And I also want to say special thanks to Miho and Esther and Catherine for organizing today. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Fiacra, and thank you so much everyone for joining today. And so as I put it in a chat box, we couldn't cover all of the questions raised by everybody. So we put my email address and Esther's email address, and please do not hesitate to reach out to us for any questions you may have, and then we will continue our discussion. Thank you very much, and have a pleasant day.